plans changed. I'm going to do Simplicity VUC 9585. I'll save this one for viscose or something. And it doesn't look right yet, but if you fold it on the size that I need to cut it, it will fit in. And I like the length, so I can go ahead. I'm now going to transfer the pattern markings, the buttonholes and the darts. Does not have pockets, but I do have enough material to cut out pockets on this. Might be a bit high, but I can always make it a bit deeper if I have to. And that's the pocket. Okay, so these are the pockets on the linen skirt, and I'm going to put binding around it for where the hand goes in, and this is on top pockets, so you sew them on top of the skirt. Pockets are sewn for the bias binding. Now I'm going to iron onto the facing for the waist. This linen skirt took a hiatus for a while. I went traveling, but I'm ready to finish it. So I'm first going to do all the darts. It's got 2 darts in the front and 2 darts in the back. For darts, my stitch length is on 3.5 and straight stitch. And then I just sew them. I don't like to go back and forth when I start a dart at the end. So I just go on very fine stitching, 0.5 millimeter. And that way it won't unpick. So I've done the first about 1 millimeter, and now I'm going to put my stitch length back to 3.5. All the darts are done. I'm now going to iron it all flat and put on the iron on for the button band and for the facings on the top. I ironed all the Vilene on. I've sewed the side seams. I've got quite a wide waist in comparison to my hips, so I always have to make the side seams as small as possible. I also finished ironing all the darts and the pockets. I can now just overlock all the side seams, the bottom of the facing and around the pockets. Before I can do the side seams, overlock them, I need to pin the pockets in place. I almost forgot that step. I must say that's something I often forget. So this pattern did not come out with pockets, so I just made my own patch pockets and I pinned them on, and then afterwards I will overlock the side seams all together. When you overlock a seam that's cut on the bias remember to start at the widest part, because when you work, the fabric will pull like that, and when you start there it kind of keeps its shape much better. Now I'm doing the waistband. It's just a facing and I've pinned it in place. Going to sew it down, do the little cuts so it folds back properly. And I think I'm going to do a top stitching where the waistband's going, just to make it pretty. And then it's just the hem and the buttonholes. I've done the knippies. Always do them on opposite sides. So I've done one there and then one in the middle and then one there. And that just makes it not so thick when you fold it over. I'm now going to fold it over and do top stitching on the edge over there. Next up is buttonholes. So I've got a buttonhole maker, and you just follow the numbers and then you just make sure you put a line where you want the buttonhole. I've had them too far over, so I've just moved them over to that side. 8 buttonholes later, and I almost lost my will to live. But they are done, and I can now cut them and do the buttons. When I was young, I worked for a material shop, and they used to make clothes for people. And I had to cut the buttonholes, and I actually cut it too far. And this is a perfect way of doing it. You put your pin, and then you just use your quick and pick, and you go in and you cut it with that inside part of the quick and pick. And then the pin that is there will stop the quick and pick from cutting completely through if you slip. I now need to mark where to do the buttons. When you do that, don't be tempted to put the button in the middle of the buttonhole, because then when the button pulls, it pulls over and your button is not in the right place. To mark where to put the button, I take my pin, I slide it over at the edge and I go down. And then afterwards I lift it up and I mark with my impermanent marker where the button needs to go, and then I sew it on. And I'm now going to do it for all the buttonholes. And now I lift up, and where the pin goes into the fabric is where I make a little mark. And that's where my button will be sewn on. I'm sewing on the buttons now. I'm only going to use 2 of the holes. But just a quick tip, put a pin on your button and let it rest on the edges. And this way it gives you a little bit of leverage with the cotton. If you don't do that, you often see how buttons pull into the fabric or into the buttonhole because there's not enough space for the buttonhole to fit underneath the button. I have just fitted the skirt and I love the length, so I don't like to have a small little hem when I do linen dresses. So I am going to cut out bias binding out of this piece and that piece, and then finish all the fabric that I have, because another thing I don't like is to have all these leftover scraps and then to think up a way of using it. So this hem will just have a piece of bias binding about this wide that I will sew in, I think by hand in the end. I'll sew it on at the bottom with the sewing machine and then just do a normal hem like I would have done if I put up the hem and sew it by hand. Okie dokie, it's sewed on. I am now going to do my little knippies in opposite directions. So when it folds over, that it's not so thick and that it folds over on the rounding of the skirt. Overlock that, and then, or maybe, I think I might iron it flat and then sew it in by hand. And then it's just the buttons, then the skirt is done. I have done my little cuts, and now I'm doing top stitching on the bias binding side. Autumn is starting to show its face and its colors. And look at that big tree over there.